Hi, it's Mike with AskTractorMike.com. You bought a new tractor or piece of equipment, you brought it home, used it, something on it broke, you took it to a dealer to get it fixed, figured everything would be covered under warranty, and it's not. The bill is yours. 9 times out of 10, it's a result of what we're going to talk about today, and it's preventable. I'm going to give you a little brush-up course today in greasing your tractor or your brush hog. Whatever has moving parts on it requires greasing. A lot of times when I was in the dealership world, I'd go back to the shop and the technician would be working on a nearly new piece of equipment, and I'd say, "What happened?" And he'd say, "Customer didn't know what a grease gun was." Well, how would you if you'd never been around equipment? And when you grew up as a farm kid, you had kind of an unwritten deal with your dad. You get to drive a tractor at the age of 12, but you better keep that grease gun handy. And ever so often when you were using the tractor, shoot a little grease in these grease zerks. And if you didn't, you're in big trouble because Dad didn't like to grease either. And if you drove the tractor, you had to do the job, the dirty job. A lot of you probably bought a tractor this year because I hear from you, and you've never owned a piece of equipment ever. And when I started in the business over 25 years ago, most of the folks who were buying tractors had either grown up on a farm or maybe their granddad owned a farm and they'd been on a tractor seat. But now a lot of folks that are buying these smaller tractors have never been around tractors, and they may not know the importance of finding all these little grease zerks on a tractor and pumping a shot of grease in them on a regular basis. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to answer a question from one of my viewers. Well, first off, what does grease do? Grease is basically an oil with a thickener in it that you shoot into pins and bearings, and as there's pressure in there, that oil is forced out. So it gradually comes out, and that lubricates everything that's moving in there as it works. So you're going to see little oil and grease come out. Now, there are sealed bearings that we use in a lot of our automotive applications, and they'll probably never come to the ag market, the tractor market. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, I'm not sure they're strong enough to last in the hostile environment of the tractor world. And number two, if you could put sealed bearings in tractors and skid loaders and things like that, I don't think customers want them, because farmers and folks that run industrial equipment and commercial lawn mowing people want grease zerks because they feel like they need to put that grease in there and then they know it's lubricated. A few years ago, one of the major commercial lawnmower companies dropped the grease zerks on the front wheel spindles. Now, I was working in the dealership world then, and sounded like a great idea. They don't actually need a greasable bearing in there. They put the sealed bearings in, and they work great, but the customers hated them. The commercial lawn mowing guys demanded they have a grease zerk on that front wheel spindle. So after a couple of years of no grease zerks, they came back with a grease zerk. And they didn't need it, but the customers demanded it. So I don't think you'll ever see sealed bearings in an application like a tractor. And if you didn't grow up on a farm, you probably don't realize there's these grease zerks all over the tractor. How do you know if your tractor was greased when you got delivery of it from your dealer? Well, I hate to tell you, assume that none of the grease zerks have been greased. Because a lot of times in a dealership, you're buying the tractor in the heat of battle when they're doing 40 or 50% of their business in that April, May, June period, and they don't have their top mechanic prepping that tractor for delivery. They may have a high school kid out there prepping that tractor for delivery, and he's got a list of things he needs to do, but if he signs his name at the end, that tractor goes out and they're done. So assume that none of these grease zerks have been greased. And the easy way to tell if it's on a painted part of the tractor, if it's got paint on the top of it, it's never been touched. So grab your owner's manual, and your owner's manual will tell you where every grease zerk is on that tractor. If you've got a new tractor, grab that owner's manual and go to every grease zerk and shoot grease in it. So what's going on in here, and how do you get the grease in there? A grease zerk is a fitting that leads to an area where there's bearings or pins, and it has a ball in the end of it. When you put a coupler on the end of it, that pushes that ball in and lets grease flow from the grease gun into the fitting. And when you release the coupler, pull it out, that's when the ball comes back. The pressure of the grease in there pushes the ball back, and that keeps everything in that system. When it's time to grease, you can go to your local farm supply store and buy a cheap grease gun, and that's fine. Any grease gun will work. I prefer the lube shuttle system for many reasons. It's a German-built grease gun. It operates off a lot of pressure that sucks grease out of the tube and pushes it where it needs to go. And it'll generally get grease in a lot of places where a common grease gun won't get it. A lot of these farm store grease guns are built in third world countries, and I have doubts that they're really that great at getting the grease put where it needs to go. I have no doubt about Lube Shuttle. I sell it on my website, full disclosure here. It helps support my channel, but it's a great concept. When you get ready to change the tubes in a standard grease gun, you've got to pull a long rod with a spring back and get it to lock, and then unscrew everything and hope it doesn't come loose and mash a finger, and then fish a nasty grease tube like out of the canister and put a new one in. It's a nasty job, and it's why a lot of people hate to grease. With Lube Shuttle, you just take a new tube, plastic tube that's recyclable, push the disc at the bottom up so a lot of the grease comes up over the top of the tube, and then put it in the grease gun, and you're ready to go again. It's very simple. Takes just a couple of seconds, and it takes all the mess out of the greasing process. Either way you go, whichever grease gun you use, here's what you do. If you've got a standard coupler, just push it on the grease zerk. You'll feel its seat and push that ball back in the grease zerk. Then you're ready to grease. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, on a lot of these new tractors, and I'm really disappointed about this, some of the manufacturers are putting really cheap grease zerks on these tractors. And if you don't get that coupler just exactly in the right place, it's not going to take grease. And some of them have got short necks on them. They're tough for the grease guns to handle. And I don't know why the manufacturers are doing that. I see them cutting costs in areas that I wouldn't cut costs, but that's neither here nor there. You can replace those grease fittings if they're having problems taking grease. It's not a huge job, but you want to get that coupler just dead straight with that grease zerk, or it'll come out one side or the other. One thing that I have that I like is this safe lock, and this is a safe lock long. It's got a long snout on it. It locks on. You push the handle, put it on the grease zerk, give it another push in till the handle clicks out, and it's locked on. It won't come off. And then you can put the grease in, and all the grease is going to go where it's supposed to. Start pumping the grease gun. This is a pistol grip. I prefer the pistol grip with the lever grip because you can operate it with one hand. But whatever you use, pump that grease. And generally when you know it's full, if you're watching outside of the grease area, you'll see grease start coming out. And most of the time you'll hear kind of a crackling sound of the new grease pushing the old grease out, and you'll know it's full. Once that starts happening, you either see the grease come out or you hear it come out. You're done and the job is over. So that's how you do greasing. That's how it works. And if you'll do that on a regular basis, I guarantee your equipment will last longer. Okay, let's get to our viewer letter today, and it comes from Wayne. And Wayne says, I have a question about greasing. When you get done, should you wipe excess grease off from where it goes out from the loader arms? He's talking about right around here, but it could be anywhere on the machine. I think if you let grease stay around the pins, that would keep dirt from getting in your pins. Well, Wayne, I agree with you, but not for the same reason that you should leave that excess grease around there. Let me tell you a couple of things here that I think about why you should not wash the grease off. And I may get some blowback from this, but here's how I feel. When I was in the equipment business and I would go out to evaluate the value of a trade, if I saw wads of grease right here, that was a good thing. That told me the customer knew how to do maintenance, might not know how to do cleanup, but knew how to do maintenance. So it was getting regular shots of grease. And if you have a new tractor and you regularly wipe all the grease off so it looks like it's pristine, and you have a warranty issue, that's going to make it look like you're not maintaining that tractor. So in my opinion, especially on a new tractor, just leave that residue on there. It shows you're doing your job. The other thing I'll tell you about grease, I traded for a tractor one time. There was a Long was a tractor manufacturer. They were based in Romania, and they mainly made kind of crude third world tractors that were cheap, and they sold them in the US. And then they had a line of compact tractors, the farm tracks. And I think this was a farm track like 490 or 390 that I went to look at to evaluate for trade. And the guy that owned it was a customer of ours, and he was obviously really good at greasing tractors. He used grease a lot, so I knew it was maintained. And then I guess what caused this, he would load it on a trailer and drive it down the road, and all the air from the highway would just blow grease everywhere. I mean, this tractor was covered from front to back with grease everywhere, and he didn't clean it up for me to look at it. And I came out and looked at it, and it was probably the most disgusting looking tractor I'd ever seen. Again, it was just covered with grease. But I knew underneath that grease was an almost new paint job, because grease on top of paint preserves the paint. It keeps the UV lights from hurting it. It keeps the wind and rain and everything, the weather, from discoloring the paint. So I knew underneath that was a really good paint job. And so we traded for it, and it was probably the most disgusting looking tractor we ever traded for, that turned into probably one of the best looking tractors we'd ever traded for after we hit it with a power washer. It took all that grease off, and underneath was just a pristine tractor. It looked like it came off the showroom floor. And we sold it in a couple of days because it just looked like a great tractor. Their compact tractors were made by Mitsubishi, by the way. So those were good little tractors. They weren't third world tractors. And so it sold. So underneath all that grease that you leave on there, your paint is protected. So I don't worry about getting the grease off. It shows I'm doing my job, and it keeps that paint preserved. But if it bothers you, wipe it off. If you blow it off with a power washer, you'll have grease everywhere, because it blows off on your seat and on your roll bar and on the rest of the tractor. But if you start at the front and go to the back, you can eventually get it all off. I prefer to take just a dry rag and wipe it off, and you'll get the same job done. But Wayne, to answer your question, I don't think that having grease caked around a bearing area is going to prevent dirt from coming in, because bear in mind, when the grease is doing its job, the pressure inside is pushing grease out. So I think that's going to keep the dirt out. Now, having said all of that, having grease on your tractor anywhere is going to accumulate dirt. It kind of seems to attract dust and dirt. If you're out brush hogging, weed seeds and all that stuff is going to accumulate around that grease, but it comes off real easily. And again, it protects the paint underneath. So that's my opinion about it, Wayne. Appreciate you guys watching my videos. One thing that you could do me a favor, if you get value from my videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That helps me out. I won't call you. I won't bug you with junk email. I won't do anything with that. It just lets me know you support my channel. And if you could do that, I'd appreciate it. It's real easy. Just click the mic face icon and check the bell so you're notified when I post future videos. Here's a link to my website and the Tractor Fun Store, where you can find lube, shuttle, and other cool things for the tractor enthusiasts that help support my channel. And here's a video about how to select the right grease. You might want to watch that. Thanks for watching.